Good afternoon and welcome to the May 2nd edition of the Gold Goats and Guns Short News. I'm Tom Luongo. We've got a lot to talk about. And today we're going to talk about Venezuela again. We've got some things I want to discuss in relation to the actual geopolitics of the situation in the aftermath of the failed attempt by Juan, Mr. Random Guy Guaido, and his ham-fisted and inept attempt to oust the equally inept Nicolas Maduro from office. I wouldn't say equally inept, I guess, because you got to give Maduro some credit. He survived this one. So, but before we get started, I'd like to give a shout out and a thanks to everybody who's joined the channel recently. Really appreciate it. This is going out simulcast not only on YouTube, but also on dlive.tv/Tom Luongo, where you can donate directly and you don't have to pay the Google 30% tax as if you want to donate to the channel. You can donate directly through a utility, an Ethereum-backed utility token. So if you want to do that, that'd be great. Also, in some news, I just put together a thing with another YouTuber called Crypto Rich. He's a regular on the channel, and he and I are in discussion about doing a series of talks on cryptocurrencies in general, both in theory and individual coins and whatnot. And we're gonna add that to the regular mix of things. Catch as catch can over the course of the next few weeks. We'll do a series of vids, and hopefully those collaborations will come off great as well. You can follow my work over TFL1728 on Twitter. You can follow me and you can read my work over at tomluongo.me. And then, of course, if you like what you hear today, please consider becoming a patron over my Patreon, where you can sign up for the Gold Goats and Guns newsletter. Okay, with all of that out of the way, let's get to the discussion of the day. So, Juan Guaido, or Random Guy, I think is the way they're describing him over at Moon of Alabama, which I really enjoyed. Random Guaido. His insurrection is over. Didn't last but a few hours. I remember when we talked about this while it was going on Tuesday. I said that if they didn't take over the La Colorada air base, that this thing would fall apart almost immediately. Bernard over at MOA did a great job covering the ins and outs of what happened on that day. And since then, you really got to give it up to Bernard for his coverage of the events and how the localization of the coup attempt itself was almost laughable. And his latest article is really well done. I should actually put a link in I'll put a link in the description of the video down below so you can read it just to make sure, because Bernard really does deserve a massive shout out to the information that he was able to get out to everyone. Because it looks like the United States was sandbagged, or as Bernard put it, snookered by Maduro and company, in that they pulled the trigger on this because they had apparently gotten a number of confirmations of major military personnel within Maduro's military that they would join the coup attempt. And then that didn't happen. This is my smug face. Okay. I have to really give it up to Maduro if that's exactly what happened, right? You got to think about that from that the best way to get someone offside, right? It's a kind of a classic move by Putin. He always allows his opponents to overextend themselves. Being the great judo master that Putin is, he knows when to allow his opponents to all the rope to hang themselves and to overextend themselves, and then he just pushes them. So in this case, the United States, under John Bolton, who, by the way, is the architect of all of this. This was confirmed by an article I read this morning. I think it was either the Washington Times or it was on Zero Hedge, I think, where Trump ceded the whole operation to this thing to John Bolton, who has been now pressuring in the aftermath of this failed attempted coup, pressuring the Department of Defense to go full invasion. And the heads of the Southern Command are saying no, and putting serious pushback against Bolton and his national security staff, who are trying to browbeat a bunch of generals into attacking Venezuela like Bolton thinks he's president or something. So when you fail as spectacularly as Guaido has, he doesn't have any popular support. He doesn't even have any He doesn't have any support really outside of Washington, which we've known from the beginning. This is nothing new. This whole affair, and I'm sure that Bolton is seething over this because he understands just how big an embarrassment this is. When you really start to think about the diplomatic fallout from this, we browbeat something like 60 countries into recognizing Juan Random Guy Guaido as the legitimate president of Venezuela. All countries, almost all the countries of Europe. I mean, how many people in Europe received this guy as the president of the real president of Europe? All going along with Bolton's assurances that this thing was a done deal, that this thing was done and dusted, and Maduro's days are numbered, and you better get in line because if you don't, then you're going to face sanctions from us, or you're going to face this or whatever. We're gonna squeeze until the pips squeak, right? This is the John Bolton we all know well and love. And I'm like, and now they're all like, what are you doing? And we just look like the biggest bunch of assholes, which in this crowd is nothing new, but to a greater portion of the world now, we look like a bunch of warmongering assholes. Remember, you don't embarrass your partners politically on the world stage. Nothing is worse than affronting the egos of politicians around the world. So now all of these governments that backed our play in Venezuela look like complete assholes. And now we're putting a full embargo on Cuba. And Federica Mogherini, the head of the EU's, the spokesperson of the head of the EU's foreign ministry, says, we're not going along with this. This is absolutely no way. So finally, the EU is standing up to all this, the monumental little mice that they are. It's insane. So it's incredible what they've pulled off here, because this is like the Bay of Fat Pigs. I think is the way I described it this morning for my subscribers on Patreon. Was I did my weekly market report a day late because I was so focused on so many other things. That the fact that we're going to try and double down on this and trying to starve the Venezuelan people even more of capital and food and energy and everything in order to get what we want is absolutely abhorrent. And in every way, John Bolton needs to be fired immediately. And if Trump has any sense of what it takes for him to get reelected, he should fire John Bolton right now, but he can't. And I'm sure that Bolton is running this operation thinking, I'll get rid of this freaking moron Trump. Absolutely, I'll get rid of this guy because he's just an idiot too. Because nobody understands the real problem in this world like I do. That's the kind of person John Bolton is. Take Elliott Abrams, take Mike Pompeo, the rest of them. What's really sad. So, at the end of the day, what's John Bolton going to do now? He's going to go over to Europe and tell Angela Merkel, get in line and spend even more money on NATO so that we can foment even more ridiculous regime change attempts in Venezuela. They couldn't pull this thing off after 6 months of priming the pump. After 6 months of sanctions and starvation and electricity grid failures and destroying their oil exports and all of it. The bribes, the CIA operations in country, all of it. And this is how laughable it wound up with. They took over a couple of blocks outside of an airbase for a couple of hours, and then the whole thing fell apart. It almost looks like that the guy Lopez, who's going to be the head, who's going to be the co-leader of this insurrection with Guaido, the guy that was broken out of military prison. Apparently, it looks like he was released by mistake, in a sense, gifted to Guaido. And then when he realized just how much amateur hour this thing was, honestly, it looked like a Tesla board meeting, for fuck's sake. He fucked off to the Chilean embassy. Then he didn't like the accommodation, so he fucked off to the Brazilian embassy. The U.S. intelligence today is an oxymoron. It's incredible. Absolutely incredible how badly they have screwed up completely here. This looks like, again, this is just a bay of fat pigs. And Mike Pompeo is the biggest fat pig of the bunch. Unbelievable. And the guy, of course, who's going to take the brunt of this is not Bolton. It's not Pompeo. It's not Elliott Abrams. It's Donald Trump. Because he had to sign off on all this. Because he was told by his handlers and by everybody else, go along with this. Leave John Bolton to his operation. Because, again, from the same reports that I've read earlier, the only reason we haven't invaded yet, we haven't put boots on the ground, is because Trump himself hasn't put the order through, because Trump doesn't actually want to do it. There's still this small ray of hope that Donald Trump wants to do the right thing and wants to be the guy that he ran as, but he's absolutely not allowed to do so. We still have a little bit of evidence of that. I don't know how I'm not trying to make excuses for Trump or anything. I know that Trump is just enough of a narcissist and just enough of a feckless twat that he'll do whatever is going to make him look the best. That's what he'll do. That's his only guiding principle. Does it benefit Donald Trump? Okay, I'll do that. He'll talk a good game about MAGA, but, whatever. So that's where we are. And he knows that this is a massive loss of face. This is going to make it impossible for them to conduct any kind of foreign policy and any kind of diplomacy now around the world. No one is going to listen to these guys anymore. That's actually a very good thing, because now they're completely isolated. And Pompeo apparently called Russian Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov about this issue, and Lavrov read him the Riot Act. Pompeo thought he was going to and just, do his typical friggin' I'm going to tell you and to dictate to you the terms of your surrender. And Lavrov was like, if you guys keep it up in Venezuela, you're going to have enough problems on your hands around the world. You're not going to be able to deal with them. So stop it and knock off the nonsense. If Trump ever wanted an opportunity to rid himself of the neocon spiders in his web, all of this, by the way, was all timed as a... See, let's back up for a second, because what's tomorrow? What's not tomorrow? Today's Thursday. What's Saturday? Aside from the fact that it's Star Wars Day, May the 4th, right? It's also, which is a great day, and I'm going to and I'll celebrate by watching probably season 3 of Rebels on Blu-ray. But what is also happening on May 4th? It's Israeli Independence Day, which is supposed to be the day that the Donald and the Kushner and the Bibi unveil their deal of the century, where the Palestinians basically get told, you can have a rock over in the corner of Jordan, and the rest of us are going to take everything you own. That is why this thing was supposed to go off this week. And this, to me, smells of a Russian and Chinese trap. Here you go. We're going to hand you all of it. We're going to hand you all the tools you need to run a massive military coup against Nicolas Maduro. Oh, I'm sorry. That didn't work, did it? Ha! It's like freaking... Yeah, it screams Putin. It screams Putin. Sandbag these guys like you would not believe. This is what you get for going up against a top Russian intelligence agent. I'm sorry. It's beautiful. Because we're so desperate to sell all of this stuff. Because remember, if this thing goes off without a hitch, Iran's next. Then they can take the 50 freaking guys in the MEK and they can do the same thing in Iran. That's what they're hoping for. Remember, Giuliani, Bolton, and others have all stood in front of the MEK at Washington think tanks and said, by this time next year, speaking last year, by this time next year, we will be having this, you will be having this conversation with us in Tehran because you guys will be in charge. That's their plan. Hold on for just a second. I just got a text. Not important. Okay. Never know when it's going to be something important. I don't get very many texts, so the texts are usually important. Must obey them. If they're the wife, must obey them. So, you know that this was done for the optics of attempting to put as much pressure on Iran as possible, and for everybody in the Middle East to realize, oh no, the American regime change machine is back, baby. We're back and better than ever. The empire's striking back, and we're on top of it. None of this silly, serious stuff where the Russians can bring in 35 planes and undo all of our plans, because that's what happened. It's immense. Don't get me wrong. Pat Hacker is saying that this isn't Putin. It's Venezuela, and the people there are much more politically aware than the U.S. citizens are. I'm not trying to take anything away from Maduro and his military and everything else. But don't kid yourself. The Russians have intelligence assets on the ground. They have military advisors on the ground. So do the Chinese. They've all got significant investments in each other to make this thing go off. And the timing on this is incredibly important. It's setting this up in such a way as to try and, because the Americans wanted this to go off in late April, early May, the time with Israel and the unveiling of the plan. So 6 of one, half dozen of the other. Both of them, everybody was involved in this at a certain level. All right. So 744748 says the U.S. needs the Venezuelan oil in order to compensate for a spike in oil prices when the U.S. attacks Iran. I'm actually going to disagree with you on that to an extent. We need Venezuela's oil off the market to subsidize increased exports of U.S. oil, which are increasing at a rate that no country has ever increased their export rate at in history. Not the Saudis, when they started coming online, nobody. And have increased the rate of oil production like we have. Our infrastructure can't handle it. It's being shipped out dirty. It's being shipped out at $10 and $15 underneath the market. We need those barrels off the market. We also need the Iranian barrels off the market in order to make our exports marketable overseas. Of course, we export light sweet crude. Most of the world runs on heavy sour. Venezuela's oil is the heaviest and the sourest of all crudes. And Iran's oil, for the most part, is also a heavy sour blend. So is the Saudis. So are the Russians. Heavy sour blends tend to make more diesel fuel and heavier hydrocarbons, whereas the light sweet crude is used for gasoline. We don't have the infrastructure here in the United States to utilize all the light sweet crude that we produce, because the pipeline infrastructure and the refinery infrastructure is all out of whack. We still import most of our light sweet crude from the North Sea, or at least we have in years past. That may have changed, and we also import a lot of light sweet crude from Nigeria for these reasons. So, but it is part of this. There's a lot of tin pot refineries in China, and many of the major refineries in China also take light sweet crude. So this is all really, the Venezuela thing is all about Trump's attempted trade war against China in order to try and use oil pricing as another bit of leverage in order to get the Chinese to cave. The Chinese aren't going to cave. They don't need to cave. Okay. And the more heavy sour that stays on the market, that comes in from various sources, the more that undergirds the economies of Iran, Russia, Venezuela, and puts pressure on Saudi Arabia to depeg the real and get off the petrodollar. That's the game that's being played here. So, an economic debacle is in the cards between now and then. 744748. I absolutely agree with you. This is one of the hallmarks of this channel. We talk about it all the time. We are in an incipient dollar liquidity crisis and therefore dollar melt up. This is what's happening right now as we speak. We've got a European sovereign debt crisis on tap for later this year or early into 2020, and all of this is going to make it very difficult for by the end of 2020 for Trump to get reelected, if the commensurate rally in the dollar then causes a commensurate slowdown in global economic activity, which is what is coming. That's part of the reason why you're seeing all these surprise inventory builds in the oil markets. We saw one today from Russia. We've seen them from the United States. We've seen them from China. And the reason for these things is that demand is actually falling off a cliff, which it's not good for anybody. So our economy probably won't fold until around 2021. It's going to be fungible here. I mean, these time frames are very nebulous. It all depends on when the collateral trains start to break and things start to go haywire. That could happen tomorrow. It could happen next month. It could happen in July. It could happen in October. But once it starts to go, it's going to go quick. And as always, and this is why Trump is asking for the Fed to cut interest rates now. He understands there is a liquidity problem. He also understands that the Fed is part of the reason why it exists. But at the same time, he also wants to pay for his $2 trillion freaking infrastructure program. Oh, by the way, by raising gas taxes by 25 cents a gallon. That's a real popular freaking plan. That's going to go over like a lead balloon. It's like, what is he trying to do? Not get reelected? Unbelievable. Thoughts on the strategic oil reserve? Our strategic oil reserve, in what respect? I don't think we've tapped into it recently. I don't think we're going to mobilize it. If anything, it's stocked to the gills, and we've got oil sitting on freaking tankers, all parked offshore because we don't know where to put it all because we don't have the storage for it anymore. The war against Iran would only start after the 2020 elections. Possible. If Trump launches the war against Iran, it will have nothing to do with oil and everything to do with Israel. Yes and no. The two things are inextricably interlinked. Okay, all of Trump's policies have been built around his energy dominance plan. Make the U.S. the marginal supplier of oil, the supplier of the marginal barrel of oil in the world. Therefore, we're the price setter, and everybody else is the price taker. We're the price maker; they're the price takers. It's been the other way around for a long time now. It bothers Trump to no end that somehow he thinks we can get the 15 million barrels a day and become the price makers in oil. Unfortunately, we're going to do so at a higher price than we can sustain. So in order for that to happen, we have to take 3 to 4 million barrels of oil off the market. Venezuela, Iran, anybody, Libya, anybody who we don't like. Eric, SFCA says, Russia brought winning Syria knowledge to Venezuela. The first point of this is don't act on provocations. Exactly. Putin knows how to deal with Trump. He knows how to deal with the Americans, which is don't take the bait. Everything is about don't take the bait. And it costs Putin points here and there at home amongst hardliners and amongst conservatives and sometimes even amongst the communists. But in general, it doesn't hurt him enough to matter. Bolton thinks that every time Putin's approval rating drops by a point, he's winning. I mean, this is how insane these guys are. What was that with Bolton blaming Cubans that are in Venezuela for Maduro not falling? That doesn't make any sense. Very little of what happened this week made any sense. And the fact that they tried to float the story that the Russians told Maduro to stay in power, that he was on the verge of leaving, that's nonsense. The whole coup was confined to about a 2-block area around the overpass around the La Colorada airport or La Colorada air base. It's insane. The whole thing is nothing but a pure freaking psyop. Today's 200 Russian Chinese intel arrive in Venezuela, and this happens. A little wave to U.S. intel. Who in their right mind would associate with Islamic Marxists? John Bolton. If it'll get him his war with Iran, then yeah, he will. To build new ice caps. Franz, you're really funny. All right. Trump doesn't even play checkers, Peel. We're tiddlywinks versus, I mean, the Chinese are playing Go, the Persians are playing chess, the Russians are playing chess at a minimum. Trump is playing poker like a dude with a big stack and no experience. And, he's got no experience in infinite rebuys. That's the way he's playing. That's the way a lot of our foreign policy plays out. Think of it this way. Think you're a guy who thinks you're a good poker player. You normally play like, 2-4, 3-6, so you play limit poker. I'm really good at 3-6 poker. I think I'm going to walk into a 25-50 or a 5100 no limit game, underground no limit game with high rollers, or I'm going to walk into, one of those over at, a Las Vegas casino. You're good at playing 2-4, but no, we're going to walk into the 5100 or the 2 or the 100-200 game, right? And because you're just convinced that you've got more money than everybody else, and you can just bully the table. So you walk in and you put $10,000 on the table, and you just think you're going to, use your big stack to bully people around. And for a little while, it works until people figure out your game. Until everybody figures out that you like to bluff with, unsuited connectors. Okay? That's what goes on here. And every once in a while, you get paid. Every once in a while, you river a good card. Every once in a while, you bully a guy out of a pot because he really doesn't want to, he's just not ready for it. He's just like, okay, fine, I'm going to feel this guy out. And then eventually, once everybody figures it out, boom. Then the money starts flowing away from you like mad. Then you start losing $300, $500, $700, $1,000 a pot. And you're like, shit, I got to rebuy and put another 10 grand on the table and start bullying the table. No, you can't do it anymore. They know how you work. And if you can't change your game, and John Bolton has never been able to change his game. Neither is Donald Trump, and Mike Pompeo doesn't have any fucking game. And that's what we're dealing with. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. These people are very smart, but they're not very clever. All they ever do is what worked before. This has happened before, it will happen again. No, this worked before. Now it's not going to work again. And they just think that they can bully the table and they can get everybody to do what they want. And people are getting tired of the bullying. As Halsey English would say, he's playing 16D underwater rape dolphin chess. Love them rape dolphins, baby. Love them rape dolphins. I want my moat. You're damn right. We need a Luongo private poker stars. Oh God, I am not that good a poker player. We'll be playing 25-50. That's 25 cents, 50 cents. Maybe pot limit. I'd be happy to play pot limit 25-50. But that's about it. Trump is Phil Hellmuth. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. There you go. I like that one, friends. More comments like that, and I'll read them out. All right. Where are we here? We are at 27 minutes. I think we're getting right about the other way around. Clever, but not very smart. No. In order to be clever, you have to be willing to change your game. You have to be able to come up with different solutions to the problems. You can be book smart. You can have intelligence and not be very clever. All right. It's clever people who run the world. It's clever people who figure out new stuff. It's clever people who do great things. It's smart people who are so convinced that they're smart, they go broke. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to start talking about Elon Musk. That'll be this weekend. We'll talk about that this weekend because that guy, that guy's going to go broke and it's going to be glorious. I'll refer you back to an article I wrote a long time ago called Geniuses of the Left and the Glory of Cars. Called it 6 months before Elizabeth Holmes went busto and is going to jail. Elon Musk is going to wind up broke. And I got news for you guys. George Soros is going to wind up broke as well. All right, this has been fun. 63 people on currently for a day stream here on YouTube. I don't know how many people are currently watching on DLive, but I'm sure it's in the 20s. So that's a bang up group of people. Gotta like the size of the crowd. Really enjoying what everybody's participation and showing the loyalty and the love. Really do appreciate it. Yeah, I know all about MEGA. You guys take care. We're going to do this tomorrow night at 8:30 for a full hour or more. There will be more invective, I can tell you. And we'll probably do it again, I don't know, maybe Saturday afternoon, maybe Sunday. Try to do 2 or 3 of these minimum a week. And that should do, I would imagine, right? So if you like what you heard today, like and subscribe down below, please. Really would appreciate it. We're up to almost 2,500 people. We really need to put a 0 on that number. All right, you guys take care. We will talk soon. Keep your stick on the ice.